Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jerry Ryu. This is a workshop on preserving manufactured housing. We have some distinguished guests here speaking. Kim Kuntz is the director of the California Center for Cooperative Development. Suzanne Taylor is the executive director of Augusta Homes, which owns some mobile home parks. Alan Nazaro is he's got a new title, it's a long one. It's director of something.
Disaster Recovery Services.
Yeah, so he's dealing with he dealt with the fires in Paradise and other parts of the state, is working on ways to have sustainable development in the WUIs of this world. So let's get that slideshow going again. We have a two polls, and yeah, the first one is, what sector you represent. So we have 42% from the nonprofit world, 29% developers, 21% government, and 6% advocates. The second one is about your familiarity with manufactured housing communities. It looks like 8 out of 10 people don't know much about trailer parks. We have some advocates and those who work with manufactured housing communities, and 1% who lived in a mobile home, manufactured home. So it'll be kind of a novice group. Can we start the actual slideshow now? And you can jump through the next one quickly. Next. So what's the issue with mobile home parks these days? They're being bought by investors. They're really ripe for vulture capitalists. Manufactured housing communities, the residents are not protected by any of the recent rent stabilization or anti-gouging efforts that protect apartment dwellers. We've been dealing with parks or communities where new investors come in and they jack the rents up 20, 30, 40% per year. We're dealing with one in particular where the rents were increased by 75% over 2 years. As you might guess, the residents are really stressed. They're facing displacement. And not only do they have to move and lose their home, they lose the investment in the home because, next slide, mobile homes have divided ownership. The homes are owned individually by the residents and the land is owned by a landlord. Usually it's an investor, but about 10% of the parks, the communities in California, are owned by a benevolent owner, such as a resident organization, a nonprofit corporation, or a local government. And so we're promoting the transfer of mobile home parks, manufactured housing communities, to benevolent ownership. Next slide. For those who are not real familiar with manufactured housing communities, it's helpful to think of them as being financed like an apartment building. There's a layer cake of financing, though not as many layers as most apartment projects that I've been involved in. There's first a commercial loan, could be a conventional or FHA loan, and it's also possible to have bond financing. Up at the top, there's some equity. There may be co-op membership shares nonprofit equity, or a private investor providing equity, much like they do in a tax credit project. And in between, you have gap financing. There's a specific program called MPROP for mobile home parks, CDFIs, housing trust funds. A lot of state and local government programs can fill in that gap. Now, remember, you also need financing for the individual homes. So if it's an existing park that's full, the residents already own their homes, but there may be a need for financing to repair homes or replace homes that are substandard. Next slide. There are lots of potential gap financing sources. Now, this screen, I'm not going to give you enough time to really look at it, but at the top, there's MPROP, which can be used to purchase a community, rehab a community, rehab homes, or replace homes that need replacement. Cal Home is available to rehab or replace homes, and then there are other programs here. We'll make the slides available, and through our TA program, provide more information after the MPROP NOFA is issued. Next slide. So MPROP is the Bomba Home Park Rehabilitation and Resident Ownership Program. It's a state HCD program that's been around since 1984. Currently, it has about $40 million, and a NOFA will be issued soon, real soon. The HCD NOFA schedule shows it opening in April, and I expect it'll be near the end of the month rather than the beginning, and that they will expect applications over the counter through October of this year. Again, the dates are not set, they're not precise, but it gives you an idea that is coming out soon, and there will be some time to apply. So the new NOFA application should be similar to the 2020 versions. You can go to their website, which is listed at the bottom, and take a look at the application and the NOFA to get an idea, a preview of what should be coming out later this month. Last time there was a $5 million per project limit, and that's likely to be the same. So the NOFA is expected this month, and applications will be due through October. Next slide. I'm listing Cal Home because there's a special set aside for manufactured home rehab and replacement. It was a set aside in Prop 1. $30 million is to be used to rehab or replace manufactured homes in manufactured home communities, and they must be provided. Well, they're provided as grants to local governments or cities, local governments or nonprofits, and then the money goes to individuals as either grants or forgivable loans. Little or none of these funds have been committed under this set aside to date. And so the rough deadlines are April or August of this year for a NOFA, October applications due, and it's something to watch for. And I don't know exactly how much money will be available for this set aside, but there's probably a lot. Next slide. As we've been going through this conference, we keep hearing about more things that HCD is going to be doing. Well, MORE is the acronym for their new mobile home park program, Manufactured Housing Opportunity and Revitalization Program. It's a $100 million augmentation to the MPROP program with an emphasis on rehabilitating the infrastructure of manufactured housing communities and manufactured homes. The program will be created through the budget and budget trailer language. The current language is, there's a website to it at the bottom the URL. We're looking at the legislation being approved by July, guidelines being adopted by next January, a NOFA issued by next May, and applications being taken over the counter. Next slide. So you can get more information on the MPROP-TA initiative, under which most of us are working, at CCRH. There's a special email address, MPROP-TA, that has 2 P's, at calruralhousing.org. And then we'll have a question and answer period at the end. Please write your questions in the Q&A section of Zoom or Whova, and we'll try to wrap them all together and parse them out to the speakers. Now, our first speaker is Kim Kuntz from the Center for Cooperative Development.
Yeah. Can we start the slides, Kate?
Yeah, just 1 second.
Next one. So just an idea about the breadth of manufactured homes in California. There are about 5,000 parks that include about 364,000 homes. And just like Jerry pointed out, most people own their home, but not the ground underneath it. It's really a significant source of housing across the state. And it's a form of ownership that's kind of naturally occurring, affordable. And these parks are closing really at a catastrophic rate. Next. So here's a little video.
If you're like most people who own a home in a manufactured home community, you don't actually own the land underneath. This exposes you to potential rent increases year after year, with lot fees going towards someone else's profit. You might even lose your right to live there if your community gets sold for redevelopment, and you may have few or no viable options. And that's exactly why hundreds of communities are turning to a proven model of land ownership: resident-owned communities. That's where residents purchase their communities at fair market value, becoming the new owners through what's called a co-op or cooperative structure. They make decisions through their membership and an elected board of directors. Residents also set their own lot fees and put revenues back into community improvements. In fact, resident-owned communities are proven to increase lot fees at far lower rates than commercially owned communities. Learn more and take the first steps toward turning your neighborhood into a resident-owned community with Rock USA and its national network. Rock USA, making resident ownership a reality nationwide.
So I want to just share a little bit about ROC. If we can go to the next slide. ROC is a national nonprofit that works through affiliates at the state level. And our nonprofit, California Center for Cooperative Development, operates a program that we call Cali ROC. And we, as part of this network, you have to be a certified technical assistance provider. So we have a contract with Rock USA, and we kind of say that we will use their system. And in exchange, we got to a lot of amenities and benefits for the communities that we work with. We all use a similar system. So all of these were independent nonprofits, but we're affiliated through this network. There are about 20 states that are represented. Some ROCs serve more than one state, with about 280 resident-owned communities representing about 19,000 home sites. Next. So just a little bit more about how this system works, because really the ROC program is set up to really expedite a sale and make it competitive, and also on the other end, set it up for an enduring co-op. So we get very much systems and templates, and those are all adjusted to the state that we're working in. So the ones we use are for California. And really the system is set up, of course, to benefit residents, but we initially work with the seller. So the system is set up where we are reaching out to sellers of communities. We really want to try to get those mom and pop parks, those parks that have not been sold to an investor, which is getting more and more challenging. And we actually make an offer. And then once there is an offer, we come to the residents and we say, hey, we have this offer. Are you interested in purchasing your community? It doesn't mean that we don't take inquiries from residents. Of course we do. And then we would go to the owner and ask them if they're willing to sell. But the priority is to really try to secure a deal, and the most effective way of doing that really is to work with a willing seller. And then through a democratic decision-making process, residents are making decisions. First one, do we want to buy? And then we help them to go through that process. A key part of this is really the ability to have funding, because that's the thing that always takes the longest in any kind of real estate, as we all know. The wonderful thing about ROC is that they are affiliated with a CDFI, ROC Capital, that is set up only to finance resident-owned communities. So they're right there ready to fund. And we'll start off really sharing that all we know about the community with ROC. So when we go in, we pretty much know that they are pre-approved for a loan once that offer is accepted. The ROC Capital then secures the offer, so we have a down payment, and then they will provide a forgivable loan to the community that funds all the due diligence to the resident groups. So the appraisal, all of the different studies and so forth are paid for. The loan actually can be 120% loan to value. Most of them are 110. And then there's intensive technical assistance that's provided throughout the process of the purchase. And then we're obligated as a ROC affiliate to provide assistance to that co-op throughout the life of the loan, which is 10 years, and they can refinance after that time. But we have to, and we provide technical assistance, and that's how we have an enduring co-op. So I just want to talk a little bit next slide about ROC Capital and what the communities are like. So this is just a profile that is current through the end of August of 2020. So there's been a bit happening since then, but just to give you a little picture, we're not obligated as a technical assistance provider to finance through ROC Capital. So not all of them are financed that way. They've financed since their inception, 91. Communities in 16 different states, which has preserved about 7,600 homes. There have been $287 million in permanent loans provided. They also provide construction loans when that is needed. And then a little profile of the residents that are funded through this source. About 80% or about 87% of the residents are 80% or below, so they're low income AMI. And of that portion of that pool, about 60% of them are very low income, so 50% AMI. What we have really in the resident communities is a mixture of incomes, but obviously most people that live in manufactured home parks tend to be people who who have few alternatives, and so they are usually lower income. Next. And it's hard to give any talk about any kind of alternative ownership of these manufactured home parks without acknowledging what the investors are going after. I mean, here they are, they're buying these communities that are really low income people. There's actually Manufactured Home Park University to train investors and how to do this. And this is Frank Rolfe. This is a quote for him. He's a national investor. He runs a university called Manufactured Home University. And he says, one of the big drivers to making money is the ability to increase the rent. If we didn't have them hostage, if they weren't stuck in those homes, in the mobile home lots, it would be a whole different picture. Another famous quote that is, there's a great John Oliver video, if you want to do a little YouTube browsing about this situation. Another one is, it's like buying from somebody, selling waffles to somebody who's chained to a bench in a waffle shop. So that's sort of the perspective. Next slide. So I just want to talk about how the system works. Now, there are different ways of doing resident ownership. This is the ROC model that we use. And we use a limited equity housing co-op model. There's a statute in California that defines what this is and what you can do with it. Basically, it has mechanisms to keep the property affordable as as it transitions through different members. So the limited equity housing co-op is who we're working with and helping them to purchase the park through this LEHC. And that would include the park, the property, the buildings, that all those things would be cooperatively owned. And that is all financed through a blanket mortgage over the whole thing. And then members of the cooperative purchase a share. And that share is low price. And in the ROCs, it has to be $200 or less. The residents set whatever that price is. And there's a cap on the resale value of that share. For limited equity housing co-ops in California, that is 10% per year. So it allows obviously some appreciation, but in the ROC model, they are zero equity because of these, to keep these manufactured home parks affordable. They are owner occupied. That's the goal upon sale. If there are, of course, people that are renting, no one would be kicked out and no one has to become a member. But then those people that are buying in would need to be a member and would need to be owner occupied. And then the governance works on the basis of one household, one vote. So each manufactured home, it has a vote. And then another restriction to keep it affordable over time and to prevent speculation in the California statute is upon dissolution or sale, there can't be any gain for the individuals except their share price, whatever that is. So it needs to be sold to a nonprofit or to another co-op. Next. Now, conversely, the homes themselves are not a part of that limited equity housing co-op. Those are individually owned, and there's no cap. There's nothing that people can sell their home at whatever the market will bear. They're individually owned. There's no equity or sale restriction, and then upon sale price restriction. And then when they are selling their home, they're selling their home, and they're also selling their share into the co-op. And so the sale does require then that owner occupancy and co-op membership that I talked about earlier. Next. I just wanted to share an example. We're a new affiliate and to ROC USA, and we just sold our first community in December. It was a senior housing community in Mendocino. I don't know how many of you have been to Mendocino and done some wine tasting. It's just absolutely beautiful. And if you've ever tried to get accommodations there, go out to dinner in the community, you know that it's a very, very expensive area and real estate is quite high. So for the people that were living in this park, you can imagine learning that their park was going to be for sale. It was quite a shock. And we worked with them through the whole process. The nonprofit in this case reached out to ROC and to CCCD about selling the community. The residents in the community are mixed income. I would say there's some that are very low income. I would say that most are retired public workers. You know, they're school teachers, they're people that worked in government in different ways, and chose this community as a retirement. They thought, okay, here we are here. And so the community, as you can see, it was a pretty high sale price. It sold on the market. And so it was over $13 million that these residents paid. Their loan is actually higher than that because, again, it's 110% loan to value. The nonprofit informed the people of the residents of the sale in March, and it closed in December. And that's typical of a ROC sale. It's actually the goal is 3-month turnover. But I think for most of you that have been involved, this is a pretty fast turnaround. And we had a lot of curveballs in this. So it took 9 months, which most people would consider to be pretty low amount of time. And here's a picture of these, the senior residents. We guided them through incorporation, their bylaws, co-op policies. The residents elected a temporary board to make the decisions, and now they're in the process of electing a permanent board. They got that pre-development loan. They had an appraisal. All the due diligence was covered by that pre-development loan. Then they selected a management company. They went through interviews of management companies, and they got that loan. And Cali Rock, we are in there for 10 years and providing assistance during their meetings, coaching, that kind of thing. And next slide. If you can go to the next slide, I might have been a little ahead of myself there. So not all manufactured home parks are new resident-owned parks, co-op parks. Throughout the United States, there are about 1,000 co-op communities, and they represent about 2% of all manufactured home parks in the country. And one of them is, I just wanted to give you an example. There's a lot of enduring resident-owned communities in California. Here's one is La Cooperativa Santa Elena in the Salinas Valley. This was formed as a part of the farm worker housing remedies, really, in the 1980s by Cesar Chavez. This was a super rundown park. And today it's governed by farm worker residents. Most of them are still in the farming industry. Some are retired and from farm workers. There's 100 homes, 12 RVs. They have a playground, a pool, and a clubhouse, and a laundry room. And next slide. Just finishing up. There's really effective resident leadership among the residents there. They've created all their own different kinds of things that fit what they want. They directly hire their manager who lives in the community. It's very well maintained. Their infrastructure of what they own, as the co-op owns trucks and tools, and sometimes they hire residents for some of the reconstruction. And then because they want to do some things in their community, they have a scholarship fund that people can pay into. And then when their kids go to college, they can take from that fund or benefit from that fund. They also have a funeral fund that helps to fund more elaborate funerals when somebody dies. And again, all of this is voluntary. Next. Just finishing up, just the advantages are operations at cost, obviously, of resident-owned community. There are very few income restrictions on when you come into the park. Some people have their own subsidies if they qualify. The ownership is the residents gain control both of the land underneath and of their own home. It stabilizes those payments over time, secures the value of the manufactured home, and because they don't have those vulnerabilities that can come from renting, and it protects the park from closure and being changed, and the residents determine what is best for them. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kim. Suzanne Taylor will now talk about nonprofit ownership, which is another model that we support. Suzanne?
Thank you. It's my first slide. My name is Suzanne Taylor. I'm with Augusta Communities, and you want to go next slide? I'm the executive director. I'm just going to give you a quick overview of who we are and kind of what we do. a lot of the things that Kim talked about, we have in common. And I think you'll see that through my presentation. Augusta Communities is a 501c affordable housing organization. Each actually have 5 different nonprofit organizations under our umbrella with a safe harbor and a burdens of government structure kind of sprinkled through that. We were founded 23 years ago, so we've been around a long time. I was involved in developing this model in California that has been successfully used by dozens and dozens of nonprofits today. We are guided by an overarching charitable purpose, and we think about that with every decision we make. And I think that's what sets us apart from other organizations, particularly the for-profits. We acquire and improve existing mobile home land lease communities, and land lease communities is what Kim described as the separation between the homeowner owning the property and then leasing or renting the land from the landowner. We would also purchase parks from other nonprofits or from ROCs who decided that they wanted to change their ownership structure, and vice versa. If we entered into an agreement with the residents who wanted to own a park but didn't feel like they could act fast enough, then we could purchase that and then sell it to the residents. We provide long-term affordable home ownership to households of modest means. I'm going to talk about later how we, guarantee that. We're run by a volunteer board of directors. They're unpaid, and they have a deep experience in a lot of the areas that are important to mobile home park ownership. We serve about 1,100 households with 3,200 residents. Our parks are very resident services oriented. We offer a lot of programming for those who live in our parks. And we also provide consulting service and asset management for other nonprofits and cities. Currently, we're operating 2 parks that are owned by the city of La Habra. Next slide. This one's a little bit more detailed because I figured this might be one you want to print out and remember. So I'm going to go through them a little more slowly. Again, we specialize in the land lease community ownership, specifically designed for manufactured housing. As Kim probably knows, it's a pretty complex area of law, mobile home residency law that governs manufactured housing communities. So we're specialists in that. In our communities, the residents own their homes, but rent the space from us. And that's true in all land lease communities. And it was already explained how risky that is because a profit-minded investor can cause escalating rents to drive people from their homes. So then these homes are generally left behind and abandoned. And then the landowner, especially for-profit owners, will repair those and resell them at a profit. So they get a double dip there, or replace them with a new home and also get a double dip at the expense of the person that was forced out because of the rising rents. The nonprofit ownership eliminates the risk associated with split land and home ownership. I think that's the most important takeaway, because unlike for-profit owners, we don't make our rent, maintenance, or capital improvement and other ownership decisions based on optimizing profit. Oops, go back, please. The second, probably most important point is that our properties are encumbered by regulatory agreements that place long-term affordability restrictions on space rents and actually also occupancy. And we also voluntarily abide by local rent control. But the covenants that are placed on the property really restrict how much we can raise rents and who we have to serve in those communities in terms of percentage of lower income households divided by very low and low. In our communities, after we pay our bills, the extra cash we call surplus cash is reinvested into the community improvements, resident service, and improvements to the housing stock. So we like a resident-owned community, reinvest those funds back into our park. Really helps fund our reserve accounts for improvements that are very, very, very expensive. So Another important point is that our nonprofit ownership is permanent. It doesn't go away. We would have to sell to another nonprofit. So we stabilize housing costs for the long term. Those regulatory agreements pass through to the next owner if we were ever to leave for whatever reason. Next slide. A little bit about kind of just some quick facts. We have in our projects in Southern California, I think I mentioned we had spent a lot in capital improvements, and they're very expensive. You have to save up for them, or you have to bond for them. And we have made about $6.5 million of improvements in our parks. The space rents in our parks range from $100 to $800 a month less than neighboring for-profit communities. So in comparison, you can see the cost difference. Rent increases are typically 80% of CPI, which have been less than 2% a year over our ownership. And those rent increases really get spread across capital projects as well as maintenance increases. Turnover in our parks is very, very low. People move in and don't want to move out. They really only move out, our surveys show, to move up to traditional housing. But it has gone down over the years until recently when home values shot up. Some people did sell for quite a pretty penny and made their way to their next housing situation. The vacancy rate is always less than 1%. Most of the time, it's zero. Our delinquency, and this is important, even during COVID, less than 1%. People found a way to stay in their homes in our communities. And our home valuations I mentioned earlier are steadily increasing. So the people who are living there are experiencing generational wealth. They can sell, like in the Rock model, for what they want. And the myths about mobile home depreciation in California just is not true whatsoever. Most of our households are lower income. Our average rent is $612. I don't know why I put the 67 cents there, but extremely low rent compared to competitive housing. Our average household size is 2.75, and you can see we have a spread between people under 18 and over 62. I think I had another one to share with you, and just found my notes to myself. 10% of our residents are on financial assistance. I wanted to add that. So those people who need assistance for whatever reasons financially, 10% of our residents are steadily on that program. I didn't have it on that slide. Next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about our financing. As a nonprofit, we have favorable financing available to us. Like Rock, we can go up to 120% of loan to value. And what that does is it helps pay the cost of the financing, but it also helps us fund our reserve accounts. So on the get-go, when we're buying a property, we do the physical needs study, and we determine what our capital reserve should be, and we fund a portion of that in advance, which is really helpful because we don't have to raise rents to pay for those initial capital improvements, and rents stay low. We also can issue buy properties with taxable bonds, and Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. I think we're the second nonprofit ever to use Fannie Mae financing, where we have a direct loan from them. And we're right now exploring social impact bonds, and it's looking pretty good, but we haven't found the right project for that. We also get government assistance and loans. We've been very successful in replacing our utility systems, both gas and electric, in our older parks using PUC programs. We installed a solar system, which is shared with the community with a PUC program. And we also have installed 2 internet systems in parks that didn't have access to internet previously. We can close 3 months or even faster because we have a dedicated team, a finance team, and financing authority that issues bond quickly. And we're already in the market for new communities all the time, and I already mentioned the next bullet. So next slide. Resident involvement. I want to talk about how the residents get involved in our community. Our residents are really our most important attribute in our communities because they keep everybody and each other on the straight and narrow, and they set the tone for life in the community. Nonprofits ownership protect residents from unreasonable rent increases for the life of their project. And that is not really on this slide. I already went over that. But nonprofit ownership relieves homeowners, groups, and residents of landowner obligations and risks. However, they have a say-so in what decisions we make. We alleviate neighbor-to-neighbor tension, which is oftentimes found in mobile home parks when one neighbor has to manage another. Resident HOAs set up priorities and have a say-so into how their community is operated. Our budgets, financial statement, and annual audits are available to them at any time and completely transparent to residents and HOAs. We also provide comprehensive resident services, which are scheduled resident business meetings and financial assistance, homework clubs, summer camps. We paint people's houses. We help them replace their sheds. And we also have a program to help them enhance their credit score improvement. Okay, next slide. The pressing issues we have, I think, are important to talk about, especially given the audience that a lot of people are from other nonprofits and local governments and who are attending this meeting, is that it's already been said that for-profit competition is extreme. We have found that our local agency partners, our cities and counties, have been very busy and kind of concentrating on homelessness programs and been impacted by COVID, a whole kind of reasons, but we found them to be a little bit less engaged in the manufactured housing community. And I think they should be more engaged. So I encourage anyone who's out there to reach out to a nonprofit or to Augusta or a ROC and try to work with them to understand how important manufactured housing is in their community. Insurance costs are rising out of control, and we're at the brink of not being able to insure some of our properties because of being close to the fire hazard areas and just insurance increases in general. And all these are things that we try not to pass on to the residents. And that's why we finance projects the way we do. There's a difficulty for people to get chattel financing to purchase a home, new or used. Chattel financing is like a car loan. Homes are not purchased with traditional home loans. They're purchased using chattel financing. It's very specific. There's only a few lenders out there. We have a deteriorating housing stock. We need to replace those homes. If you take care of your manufactured home, your mobile home, it will last a long, 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 long time. I mean, we have ones that are in great shape and they're over 50 years old. But if you don't take care of them, eventually they need to be replaced. And it's hard for nonprofits to find the capital to replace those homes. Rising home values, you ask, why is that a problem? In our covenants, we promise to rent our spaces to lower income households. And when the home value rises on the house that they're purchasing, sometimes they need to be, moderate income folks to afford that house, even in what you would think would be a low cost community. So there should be some government programs to help lower income households purchase even in nonprofit parks. The need for speed, government programs are structured now to be very cumbersome and slow. I think everybody who's presenting today would agree with me that we really need to speed up these processes and make them much more easy to move through. And because the primary reason is because we are competing with REITs and other for-profits that have cash and can close in 30 days. Nonprofit and co-op ownership government, I believe our communication is lacking and we should all work together on a common goal of preserving our affordable housing and manufactured communities. Do I have any time left, Kate?
You're pretty much at the limit, but we'll have some
I
time
just
later.
have one more. I have one more
Okay.
quick point. And one thing that I didn't put on here that was important is that nonprofits, I'm not sure about ROCs, but our nonprofit does not have to pay property taxes on spaces occupied by lower income households. So we are able to pay a higher purchase price sometimes than even for-profits because we don't have to pay the same amount of property taxes. We're doing the work of government. Okay, 15 and a half minutes, right?
Yep. Alan,
thank you so much for everyone attending.
Yes, thanks everyone. We've got quite an audience. Alan, could you talk with us about your experience?
You bet, Jerry. As many of you may know, the Camp Fire was the deadliest and one of the most destructive fires in California history. The town of Paradise was nearly wiped out by the fire. 80% of all homes were destroyed, while over 90% of the manufactured housing units in the town were decimated. The only hospital was leveled, and a large percentage of the businesses there were damaged or destroyed as well. Next slide. All disasters begin and end locally, and the level of impact determines the amount of resources needed and the length of time for the recovery. The higher the damage, obviously, the more funding that is required and the longer the recovery. And all this combines to amplify these kinds of community impacts listed on this slide. The town of Paradise is 4 years into recovery, and they've only recovered less than a quarter of the population they had pre-fire. And I was in the town during the Dixie Fire, and the smoke from the Dixie Fire was very close to the town of Paradise, and it just traumatized the people in the town of Paradise, thinking that it was going to come over the hill and destroy more of their town. Next slide. As you can see from this slide, there was a heavy impact on the manufactured housing units, which represented a large portion of the affordable housing in Paradise. There was also a good amount of naturally occurring affordable housing with individual rental homes there and a lower cost for home ownership in Paradise, which made it the affordable housing for the Butte County area. This was due mainly to the age and the location of the town. Losing that much affordable housing in an already stressed market created a large exodus of people and increased homelessness in the area. Next slide, please. Some of the barriers that we encountered when we were trying to help with the manufactured home communities in the area, from the beginning, we realized the difficulty we were facing in trying to assist these communities because there is virtually no disaster recovery resources available for privately owned mobile manufactured home communities. As you can see on this slide, most of the federal and state programs are aimed at the nonprofit or resident-owned parks. Even if an owner agrees to keep the manufactured home units affordable, the normal manufactured community space rental model doesn't work with most funding from the state or federal government, and the state is reluctant to modify their programs in order to help meet this need. We've encountered that repeatedly in situations where mobile home parks were destroyed by wildfires. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. One more thing. We discovered a dual impact on the insurance front with manufactured home communities, and Suzanne mentioned this in her presentation. In this instance, most parks in this area were underinsured or uninsured due to their age. Second, getting insurance post-disaster for parks in the wildland urban interface, the WUI, was either impossible or unaffordable for many owners. The population of Paradise pre-fire was about 26,000. Now, almost 4 years later, it's estimated to be between 6,000 and 7,000 people, and many of the former residents are not returning. Many of the manufactured home communities were grandfathered for their septic systems in Paradise. Paradise pre-fire had no sewer system whatsoever. Everything in the town for all 26,000 people were on septic systems with a community water system. Rebuilding these parks would prompt that these the current standards for septic systems would have to be met. This was a cost that a lot of parks couldn't handle, which has slowed the rebuilding of the communities there. The infrastructure on the sites were mostly PVC piping, which melted and contaminated the soils, requiring removal of a foot or more of dirt from each site. And dead burn tree removal was also a large cost to the owners. So these were additional costs on top of trying to rebuild, which made it extremely expensive to get rebuilds done. And there are very few that have been rebuilt as of yet. Any new MHUs, which obviously are all replacement units, even units that survived were removed or demolished since the parks weren't inhabitable after the fire. So the new MHUs must meet the state WUI standards for fire safety, and this is added to the cost of the units. And there are state and federal funding for MHU owners to replace their destroyed units, but currently not many sites in Paradise to set them on, so causing an outflow of population from that MHC community. Due to these costs of rebuilding and repopulating and the lack of deep pockets on the part of many owners, few of the parks have been rebuilt or have been sold and are able to remain affordable. There's about a half a dozen parks or so that have been bought by private owners and increased in cost. But many of the owners have been advised not to sell their property because of the PG&E settlement. As most of you are aware, PG&E was found liable for the campfire from their equipment, outdated equipment. And so there is a huge settlement that is very slowly working its way through a trust, and money is very slow in getting out, and many of these owners are waiting to see if they will get a large enough amount so that they can afford to rebuild. So that has really slowed the recovery of the town as well. Next slide, please. Every aspect of these kinds of barriers are being explored. And the first, and maybe one of the most important, is making the community safer. One resource to help accomplish this goal is the California Resiliency Challenge offered by the Bay Area Foundation. Next slide. The CRC Climate Challenge is an annual competition, and you can see more information about it and the program and past grantees on their website, which is listed on this slide. This is a great program where the Bay Area Foundation is actually assisting communities to meet or adapt to climate change and wildfire risk and flood risk and others. Next slide, please. This slide is pretty much, the information was taken from the CRC website, and it pretty much speaks for itself. I don't have to tell any of you what California has been going through over the past several years, or how bleak the future looks if climate change is not addressed and or adapted to. The drought alone in California has been lasted for so many years that the entire state is a tinderbox. Next slide. The Paradise CRC project, we, at the request of the town, a proposal was developed and submitted on their behalf to the CRC grant program. This summary was taken from the CRC proposal. The town of Paradise is facing obviously a long and arduous task of rebuilding for many of the reasons I've discussed already. They're rebuilding an almost entire community from scratch. Uncertainty about the future safety and availability of affordable insurance has helped to create doubt in the minds of some of the disaster survivors as to whether this feat will be accomplished. This project that we are attempting aims to answer these doubts and give hope for a better community to come. Next slide. We will evaluate 3 kinds of risk limiting measures: mitigation, buffers, and adaptation. The purpose of evaluating these measures is to assess the level of change that is needed in order to reduce risk, curtail losses, to make the entire community safer, and sufficiently make Paradise more attractive to the insurance industry at large. If we are successful in sufficiently making it attractive to the insurance industry, this will be a model for communities throughout the wildland urban interface to follow in order to keep their communities safer and to make them insurable. Next slide, please. There's 2 main goals of this project. It's to prioritize the risk mitigation options most likely to deliver community safety and promote sustainable and affordable property insurance. Federal and/or state resources used for wildfire mitigation and climate resiliency will require community support for the implementation of the mitigation measures. Therefore, there will also be an issue of ongoing maintenance for forest management, as well as public and private property vegetation clearance and other mitigation measures. This makes the community engagement for our resiliency planning and project implementation so important to our effort. We plan to really have a robust community involvement and engagement process and get out into the community and educate people on the need for the mitigation projects, and also how it will help them to be safer and be able to afford insurance. The cost of the mitigation versus the cost of them having to pay much higher insurance will be explained to them over the course of the planning process. Next slide. So how do we engage with the whole community? By organizing the community, the business people, nonprofits, churches, schools, funders, community members, the town will gain buy-in from the community, develop consensus on projects that align with the community values and vision, and build capacity with volunteers from the community, while also empowering community members to make change that will save lives and property in the future. That's the goal of this whole project. that is my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you, Alan. Also, thank you, Suzanne and Kim, and of course, Kate, our fearless leader who is behind the scenes. We have some time for questions and answers. If you have any burning questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&As. We can answer them individually or as a group. I seated a question. How many parks communities in California are owned by residents, nonprofits, or local governments? And it's over 300. That's about 2% of the total in California, as Kim pointed out. No, I guess that's not, well, it's a small number. We'd like to get a lot more. Are there any questions?
Jerry, there is a question in the chat for Suzanne.
About MPROP?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, Suzanne has not received MPROP, and that's not for want of trying. And to be real honest, I'm very disappointed. MPROP has made 3 awards in the last 10 years, 12 years. I actually was involved in starting MPROP, and it ran very well in the 1980s. The market's different, of course, but it kind of fell through the cracks over the last decade. State HCD has assigned new people to work on the program, and they're trying to revitalize it and get it up and running again. That's part of the reason why they hired CCRH to operate the MPROP TA initiative. So a number of us are available to assist with information on using MPROP, on buying parks as nonprofits, local governments, or through resident ownership. So definitely keep us in mind.
Can I add to that, Jerry?
Yeah.
I think that's one of the points I was trying to make during my presentation is I kind of been fighting the battle with a couple allies to try to get that those funds kind of freed up for nonprofits and other organizations. At one time, you couldn't get it if you're a nonprofit. And so it has improved over the time, but it hasn't been honed in enough. And I think one of the reasons is there's only a few of us who raise our hand and consistently are able to follow what's going on there. So with government, local governments and resident-owned communities, associations and nonprofits kind of pulling together on that in a more organized fashion, we might be able to free up some of those funds and kind of get it streamlined so that it's useful, because it has the potential to be a great program.
Yeah, one of my pet peeves right now is that the fact that housers and manufactured housing people are not cooperating. Bills, legislation to help renters often ignore mobile home owners and vice versa. Mobile home owners can benefit from rent control, but apartment residents cannot because of the Costa-Hawkins bill. Well, the mobile home residents lobbied to get out of Costa-Hawkins. And, unfortunately, there wasn't a combined effort to stop it in total. Though actually we have some differences of opinion on rent control. The anti-rent gouging laws that were passed recently don't benefit manufactured home park residents. So they're getting, while apartments may be limited to a 7% rent increase, they're getting 20%. The in-place residents are getting large increases like that.
So we still benefited from rental protections related to COVID and some other things. So we're not completely left out,
right,
whatsoever. And rent control, it's, as you mentioned, Jerry, is one has a lot of different sides to that discussion. I love rent control when it's reasonable, but you don't ever want an owner, and I'm sure Kim would agree with this, you don't ever want an ownership entity to not be able to have the funds to make a very important improvement in their park, usually related to health and safety. So you have to be careful how they're drafted.
Yep, totally. Well, it's the end of the day. At least we're not on Friday afternoon. We still have a good audience. So are there any other questions that people might have? Either burning questions or curiosities? This is an interesting field. It's very complicated. Hopefully we can get more people involved in nonprofit and resident ownership to increase the size of the those of us who are involved in the area. With more people, we'll have more knowledge and more power.
There are a few questions that we kind of preceded in the Q&A on HUVA. And because based on our polling, it sounds like a lot of folks are kind of new to the conversation about manufactured housing communities. Those might be a good place to pull from, maybe a few of them. What do you think about that, Jerry?
Go ahead, Kate. Why don't you ask those?
Oh, we just got one in the chat. Maybe I'll defer to that one. It's from Niles. Do you find that mom and pop owners of MHP are receptive to selling to nonprofits versus for-profit?
Yes, I think they're, I can speak for Augusta only, because I really don't know how that works with Rock, but they are, because there has been ways that they can benefit from participating in our financing through tax exempt financing. There's some tax advantages for them. And a lot of times when you are able to meet face to face with that mom and pop owner, they're very interested in making sure their residents are taken care of. But they're also interested in getting a fair market price. And for the reasons that I discussed earlier, we do pay a fair market price, sometimes even a little bit more. And in return, and we have a quick close. So in return, yes, we are viable candidates.
Yeah. As for resident ownership, they can be a little leery because of the time it may take to close. But on the other hand, they are receptive because many of them still have relationships with the residents, and they care about what happens to them. And in the current market of big investors increasing rents tremendously, they may be more receptive to a resident or nonprofit purchase.
We do have another question in the Q&A. Do you know or think MPROP will change their program guidelines to include funding for rehab when the MHP is not resident owned nor owned by a nonprofit?
Actually, I don't think MPROP will, but CalHome is, you should look at CalHome. CalHome has a $30 billion set aside for manufactured home rehab or replacement in rental parks. They have not used that. It was part of Prop 1. They kind of ignored it, and I'm sure they'll have quite a bit of that available in August, and we should make sure that they operate the program in a way that allows them, makes it possible for them to meet that set aside. But $30 million for manufactured home rehab.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. MPROP is looking at replacing homes for and repairing homes for homeowners, but sometimes that whole process is really difficult for a homeowner. Yeah. And we are working with them and trying to advocate for the nonprofit to be able to purchase the home or make the rehab or have the funds available, and that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, but the
because of the chattel nature of the home actually is the problem. So
well, the issue that Nyla brought up is that the park has to be owned by a nonprofit or the residents. So MPROP will not, and actually MPROP will only fund home rehab in parks that it helped finance. So it's part of a package, and they won't, I doubt that they'll change. But who knows? There is the new home program. No, home, more program. And we'll all have to look at that. Take a look at it. Kate, did you find out how our slides will be available for viewers?
It's my understanding that the conference organizers are going to help us get the slides posted to the Whova platform as well as the recording.
Okay, good. Because we have some links in the slides that should help you do some research on the MORE program and on the CalHome set aside. Oh, and then the other thing that was important, the PUC program for upgrading the electrical and gas systems in communities. I understand they're out of money right now, but that's an existing program that should be refunded at some point.
I see a message from Sergio in the chat. HCD is currently proposing to amend the MPROP. Can we provide feedback to HCD? There is a new allocation of 100 million for the program.
Yes. Yep. That allocation should be effective in July, and HCD will write new guidelines. Their target is to complete them by January, and they will definitely be open for comments. If you you can subscribe to various HCD programs. You can go to their website and subscribe to MPROP and any other programs that you might be interested, like CalHome, or maybe CERNA, because the CERNA Farm Worker Housing Grant Program has helped parks, communities with rehab. And if you subscribe to those, they'll send you notices when new guidelines and regulations are being adopted, when NOFAs are issued and things like that. So it's a good resource, good thing to be on those lists. Um, yeah, Sergio responded that he's concerned about the bill language as well as, or more than, the guideline language. The bill language is, can you all see the, if we put something into chat, can you copy it?
Yes, if you put something into the Zoom chat, I can also just post it into the Whova chat just in case that's easier for people.
Okay, let me find the link to the language for the law. Again, this is proposed language. It hasn't been finalized yet. Well, it is not even in a bill yet, but here.
Was it the link in your slides?
Yeah, and I've got it.
Jerry, we should also point out that unfortunately, even if the bill gets the changes that we want in it, the next NOFA is due to come out in either April or this month or next month.
Yeah, this would not affect that. Yeah.
So it's not going to be for the current NOFA.
Right. This will be for NOFA that is expected in May of next year. So, so can you, I guess I should have, well, that's the bill language in chat. You can download the bill language and be involved in commenting to both the legislature and HCD. There's more emphasis on rehab of parks and homes. So actually, Sergio, I think your community may have impacted the department to want to put more money into upgrading a lot of the communities in the desert. So
I'd like to say 100 million sounds like a lot of money, and it is, obviously, but it doesn't go too far when you're rebuilding neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Or replacing utilities, or, you know, when manufactured homes used to be $85,000 and now they're like 120. You know, there's 10 of them per million. So
yeah, and also parks. I mean, last week I was kind of analyzing one community that the owner was possibly interested in selling, and it'd be 150,000 per space. And then another one that we talked with earlier in the year or late last year, with the owner had paid almost 300,000 per space. And so he'll want to profit after based on that. That's San Jose, of course, San Jose market. So these communities, some of them are in this stratosphere.
I want to acknowledge that we've got a couple of questions about whether or not the recording is going to be posted. I'm going to check in with the tech people involved with the conference just to see if they can help us with that. But I would expect that if you check back on Whova tomorrow or the next day, that the recording should be there. I'm just going to try to confirm with the tech folks. I'm looking on both Whova and on Zoom for any additional questions. Does anybody see any?
No.
A couple are coming through in the chat. Question from Mary. Anyone thinking about legislation to motivate for-profit owners to sell to resident groups? It's a valuable source of affordable housing.
Yeah, the Housing California is working with a group to try to pass legislation that would require the owners of apartments and rental housing to sell to their tenants. And I've been in discussions with that group. I think they're adding, I haven't verified it yet, but we talked about adding mobile home parks to the tenant right to purchase legislation. Whether that passes, who knows? But that's very effective. I think there are 8 or 9 states that have the right to, where residents of mobile home parks have the right to purchase when a park is offered for sale. In California, all we have is the right to notice, and it's not followed.
Jerry, wasn't there also some discussion about tax incentives?
Yeah.
Yes.
They didn't pass.
And I just want to say there are investors that have made a profit, want to sell it to residents for that profit. We encounter that a lot. It's just so unaffordable a lot of times, or it's very difficult to make it work.
Yeah, doubling or tripling in 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the one that didn't pass was they were going to give a tax write-off, so to speak, to for-profits that sold to a nonprofit type organization. And that didn't pass. I mean, at all, was, as I recall, wasn't that close. But I'd like to say that we had a bill that we worked on last year, and we changed the language in the bill like the week before it was heard by I think the last hearing. So it's possible to change things if we get the right set of circumstances and a champion that'll sponsor your change.
Yeah.
But it's hard. I did worked on it full time for a while to get that happen. So it can be done.
Kate, could you repeat what Amber said about the recordings and slides?
Absolutely. Okay, so we learned from Amberly that session recordings will be available following this event, and that the organizers will send an email letting participants know when the recordings are published and ready to view.
Great. And we will make sure that the slides are all available. Well, do you want to call it a wrap?
I think so.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This has been an interesting presentation. We've been doing variations of it for a couple years now. And I think this is the best attendance we've had. And there have been a good number of good questions. Thank you very much. We'll see you around. I'm going to attend a couple more workshops, though virtually. And then we'll have the CCRH will have its Rural Summit this fall. The San Joaquin Valley Housing Collaborative will also have its workshop in the summer, and we'll probably see you around. Take care. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.